Alright, so the world's most favorite. Okay, sorry. Let me start over. The world's favorite sport is more than 100 years old, and it began in 1863 in England. When it took a separate route from rugby. Obviously, I'm talking about soccer. It is now the most played and watched sport in the world, with a total of 3.2 billion viewers in the last World Cup in 2014. And that stat is according to FIFA. So I'm going to repeat that stat a couple times during my speech because that's pretty crazy. It was just 3.2 billion. That is like almost a little bit less than half the population of the world. So the sport is so popular because the rules are simple and it's easy for everyone to play. So everyone could just go to the park. All they need is a soccer ball, kick around the ball. And but in America, football stands in the way of soccer's total control. And today, my main claim is how soccer will overtake football as the most popular sport in America in the next 20 years. I could talk about soccer because I love soccer and opinions for hours. And listening to the speech earlier about CTE in soccer, about how they might wear helmets. As a soccer fan, I would personally inflict CTE upon myself if soccer players started wearing helmets. So, let's see. So I will be covering today how soccer creates a sense of unity and brings the nation together, how concussions from football influence parents to think of other sports and to start their children in, and how soccer viewership has increased in huge amounts over the past 30 years. All right. Let's see. Soccer, like playing soccer and watching soccer creates a sense of unity. And it brings the nation together. According to the U.S. Youth Soccer stat, there are 265 million people actively involved in soccer, which is 4% of the population, which is a lot considering that there is about 7.2 billion people on this earth. And football is only very popular in the U.S., which is like very different. Thinking that this soccer is played in like almost every country in the world. In the game, the players represent our country, and it brings us together, and that's how other countries view us as Americans. They view how soccer players play. Everyone, about probably like millions of people, are viewing Americans play soccer and how they react to tough decisions, how they react. So that's one way that people think of Americans. According to FIFA, 26.7 million people watched the last Women's World Cup. All right, and that's amazing to think because Women's World Cup is not as popular as the men's, but 26.7 million people viewed that in America. That is the third most, according to FIFA. That is the third most out of any one single event on television, and that is the first most among all like soccer events. Concussions from football influence parents to think of other sports to put their children in. All right. This is a big one because obviously there's a lot of concussions in football. According to a brain health website, 3.8 million concussions were reported in 2012. All right. Out of all those concussions, 47% of those concussions happened in high school football. All right. So soccer becomes a more safer option for a children's long-term health, whether it should be playing or watching. Some effects of concussions could be memory problems, lack of inhibition, intense anger and aggression, personality changes in attention and the lack of concentration, problems organizing, planning, and problem solving, and language impairment. So those are very like long-term, substantial injuries that can happen to your body from concussions, and 47% of that happens in football. Onto the last point, soccer viewership has increased greatly from the past 30 years. Okay, so Super Bowl 50 had a total of 112.2 million viewers, and then compared to the 2014 World Cup, which had 3.2 billion. So that's 112 million compared to 3.2 billion. All right, and then to show how the World Cup and soccer has evolved over the past 30 years in America, the viewers in 1982 had 1.6 billion, and then the viewers in 2014 were 3.2. So that's exactly double the viewers. So it's growing in an immense rate. The MLS is the third most attended sport in all of America, which is behind football and baseball, compared to 30 years ago when the MLS didn't even exist. So it went from non-existing to become the third most, and it's on a constant rise. So, in conclusion, soccer is the most popular sport in most countries around the world, and in the next 20 years, America will soon realize that too. Thank you.
All right, Matthew, you identify the proposition, but it's phrased like it's a informative speech or a question. You're going to tell us how something is happening, so not making a declarative statement or inference. I thought you did a better job, and that was true, by the way, for all of the points in the preview as well. They're all phrased kind of as a informative presentation rather than a declarative argument. Now, in the body of the speech, we're a little bit better than that, and I know that at least on the first point, there's a declarative argument here that talks about how it's going to change. So there is this kind of inference that that's being made on that particular point. I didn't really get a very clear signpost on the movement to the second point or the third point. I think that you have a tendency to just kind of arrive at those points, and you could use a little bit more internal summary on the individual points before you move to the next point, and then some kind of signpost that indicates what the structure is, reminding us of what the major points are. It's there, but I just didn't think it was as clear as it needed to be. The supporting information, there's a lot of information about the popularity of soccer, which I don't think is in dispute around the world, so there's not much controversy on that. Your prediction, though, seems to be that soccer will someday in the United States will supersede football in terms of popularity, and I think that that's where your argument needs a lot more work. You've got good information about the percent of the world population that watches the game versus in the United States. At the end, you mentioned, for instance, the data about how watched the games were. You mentioned Super Bowl 50 versus the World Cup. But again, that's the argument around the world. I don't think there's any dispute about that. That's not where your argument is. Your argument is a prediction about what's going to happen in the U.S. That's where I think the stuff starts getting to be a little bit better for your argument at the end, although it's right at the end. You start talking about Major League Soccer, is that MSL, MLS? Yeah, MLS, I guess, Major League Soccer at the end, and its growth. I think that you needed to argue that there's some reasonable way to make a projection. I think the argument about injuries, for instance, is an argument that should follow from that suggests that there's a limit to what growth there's going to be in American-style football, whereas there is not that kind of limitation on soccer, and that therefore in the future we could see that more kids will be drawn to this in the long run. Of course, I think I can already predict what one of the responses to it's going to be, because we heard an argument that already kind of presumes that they're going to run into the same kinds of problems that football has run into. So maybe that is not the strongest of those points. The sources are not always consistently cited. There's good factual data in the argument, like I said, but I think you need to be a little bit more consistent and make inferences more, use declarative sentences so we know what the argument is. All right, thank you.